And now we're going to talk about how Black Panther 2 is going to rip off Aquaman. I can't believe
No,
he's doing it. We all feared it.
I'd say we just watch her video. It's really entertaining.
Yeah, but I thought you guys hated her. Every time I try to bring up, yeah,
I don't hate her. I don't hate anybody.
but she got a lot of people in the industry that she's connected to that tell her stuff all the time. And she's
Wow.
been around a while, you know. She gets to go on the press junket. So she's saying, like, so if we're just talking about number one, we're talking about the Namor Black Panther thing. That's pretty surprising in and of itself that they would want to take on Aquaman. I mean, I'm like, why would you want to do Black Panther with Aquaman? You already did the underworld stuff in Aquaman. Why do you want to do it now? You know, Black Panther has to be its own thing.
Well, I'll say this. Actually, was it Christopher Priest did a story? You know when people do the actually voice? I'm doing the actually voice. Actually, actually, Christopher Priest did a story. Was it where it was Doom,
The
Black
Illuminati.
Panther and Submariner at the same time? And I don't really like. I mean, they trying to do it like the realms. Here we got the Atlantis versus Wakanda type of thing. That's kind of very DC of them. And I don't think, especially make jump starting this means that what are they going to do? They're going to get Killmonger and come back to life, and they'll both fight Namor and beat him down. Ultimately, I think we talked about it the other day, that Namor is an anti-hero, and he's an inherent anti-hero before Magneto. He was a character that Stan was invested in becoming a success. So the Fantastic Four didn't really beat him early on. They stopped him. They would thwart his plans, but he wasn't like basically like beat down at the end or like tossed to the sky. He would leave, or he would exit the thing, and he exit in like one of the exits where they're about to fight, and Sue stands in front of him and says, "No, like no, it's over," and he'll just go, and he leaves.
But
So
I'm just saying, for the movie Black Panther, you know, like you said, I think there's been a retread that we've done. Look, the reality is that Namor is the poor man's Aquaman. That's everybody
no,
when
he
they
isn't.
associate.
He was before. He was before.
Associate the modern reader now, the modern when they associate water superheroes, that's Aquaman. Aquaman
And
got
they
name.
don't. He was the biggest joke.
Doesn't matter. Aquaman, everybody
Yes,
knows.
Aquaman is bigger. Became bigger because he was in Super Friends, and there's like, what was it, 10 years of? Don't laugh at the Super Friends. You were kids at one point.
Yes, I'm just saying. You're claiming that the claim to fame. What about Smallville when they had Aquaman in there? What about
You saying that he gained his bones in Smallville when there's
all I'm
like how many years? It's like 10 years of Super Friends, and then it stayed on in reruns.
what I'm just saying, bro, is that Aquaman is a known quantity. If you put people up, if you ask people Aquaman or Namor, people are going to tell you invariably more often.
Yes, they would know him because of that. They
Right.
made fun of him. The cartoons continually
Probably
made
in the
fun of him.
1950s, they know the Submariner, but they don't know him now. And that's
Yes,
what I'm
I
trying to
know,
say.
I know that, but that doesn't mean that he's a bigger name. In the Submariner, where DC, that's the thing. DC, Marvel probably feels that, hey, he looks like I think Byrne and Jay Lee. They did the Savage Submariner, and Submariner had lost his memory, so he had a big
Right.
hair and big mustache and beard, but he was still very aggressive, and he was very, he has the story they did with Jay Lee, like he's fighting Doom. He actually beats Doom, and it's close to the supervillain team up. But then they're actually caught in this like this glass, the sculpture. They're like stuck in this glass thing by the Master Khan. So it's one of those great stories of the Submariner, but he looks the same way. Those pictures look the same way that what's the guy's name from Aquaman? Um, we both
Who?
the person who played Aquaman,
Jason Momoa.
Jason Momoa. Thank you.
And that's my fear. You're going to have this guy trying to compare, and all people are going to do is say Jason Momoa. And I'm like, this is, to me, one of the worst ideas possible for Black Panther 2. I'd heard the rumor that Kraven, the whole reason they wanted to do Kraven, because they wanted to do the whole poaching situation with Kraven the Hunter coming into Africa, and then him being the enemy of the Black Panther. But Kraven is I think a Spider-Man character, right?
Yes, and they also isn't done right. Kraven could be a Spider-Man villain and a Black Panther villain, it makes sense because you have a Black Panther. Like I think what was it? And not to reference Byrne again, Byrne did a story where Kraven was going after the Beast. So you get this animal sort of thing with Kraven going after the Black Panther. But no one, but no one. There's only a couple of strong stories with Kraven. Early on, then you have like the death of Kraven in the story that in the '80s they did where he became Spider-Man, that sort of thing. And then you have later, which was I mean I already mentioned that other story, but you have this thing where but he has to be a good cheat. He has to be like a hunter, the ones that are set the person up and slowly bring you down. But most of the time, even Stan Lee fell into it, where Spider-Man would just beat the hell out of him. And the thing would be that he would poison Spider-Man, he would dope him up, and it'd be like up to the end where he has this win over Spider-Man, but at the same time, he did all these dirty tricks to do it. The problem is...
But not only dirty tricks, but like you just said, he set things up as a hunter. There'll be a number of traps and tricks that he would use in order to capture the superhero or to gain whatever he's trying to gain. And so I think Kraven is an interesting idea. But look, the only thing I really care about, I want to see Storm and Black Panther. And I just don't see how Storm goes into that story if you have doggone Namor. We want to waste our time spending. It's going to take away from the story because now you
need a villain. That's the thing we're losing. Doing this character, we're doing just character differences by bringing in Storm and having Storm doing her thing, and Storm would be secondary. The thing is, Storm is not a Black Panther character; she's an X-Men. So it's like, and her dynamic.
She was his wife.
Gosh, there's more time of her being with the X-Men than being.
Okay, I get that, but what I'm just trying to say is that by going a route of Namor, it's going to take away focus from the movie of it being Black Panther being the central focus. Already, Black Panther in the movie is already he has focus on a whole bunch of other people too. You know what I'm trying to say? You have the warrior.
It's not done in a successful way.
You have to have someone else, and I understand why Namor, because you have to have like a world-shattering thing to be coming after Black Panther and Wakanda. But what about you? Just said who could be the perfect villain already?
Who did I say?
Doom. They were comics already.
I don't want them. They already stole Ego. I do not want them to steal any more Fantastic Four villains.
What about AIM?
That's a Captain America villain.
Look,
that's the thing. If we haven't set up characters that work with like villains that are Black Panther villains, they used all three of them in one movie. They didn't have to do that.
I know they did. They did.
Like, Lord.
They blew through them, right?
It's a Marvel classic, screw the pooch all the time. Like, how much maximum bang for your buck? So, like, ultimately, now you have to... Now, one of the things is that the X-Men, they were the only Marvel book that would steal everyone else's villains. Like, the X-Men would do more popular stories in Asgard. They would go to Atlantis. And it was just like, someone tell the X-Men not to tread on everyone else's land. Because it's like, yes, it's a shared universe, but it makes no, like, if you run out of stories and you decide, oh, I'm going to Atlantis now, I'm going to Asgard, and then people won't read the Thor or the Namor's book because they're like, why did I do that? I'll just read it in the X-Men or read it in a more popular book. Or then you're like, all right, that's a classic thing of saying, what is my story? If I do that, does this help the other title? And it doesn't. It doesn't help these other titles. Same when the Avengers were taking on all the Fantastic Four villains. So ultimately, you have to figure out who's the Black Panther's villain, who could you do next. And right now, they used all of them. So now they got to go through the Marvel Universe and say, shake up the thing and say, oh, who do we have here? We have Doom.
But yeah, I see your point. But I say, what about, the thing is that you want to introduce other things. And how better to introduce like mutants, like Storm, by having him being part of that? How better to...
We don't need to introduce anything.
Okay, so how better to look? I just don't like the idea of the whole Namor thing. It's just too. Everybody's going to compare it to Aquaman. You know, I like the Illuminati. Yes, that's cool. But I think if it's Doom, or let's say something like Doom or the Illuminati, at this here, asked a friend of mine. He said, "Who are villains for Black Panther?" He just shot me this thing, and he said some of the villains. He shot me this article because he was like, cause I asked him before. He said, he said all the best, like you said, all the best Black Panther villains are used up already. But he said the article. He says here are something called Salamander K. Rool. I don't know who that is. He was one of Killmonger's most trusted agents in his original attempt to take control of Wakanda. The Skrulls. I don't know about that.
Yeah. That's Fantastic Four villain.
Wind Eagle.
Hulk villain.
Nightshade.
Captain America villain.
Namor. Soul Strangler.
Huh?
Soul Strangler and the Ku Klux Klan.
Those are Ku Klux Klan, but they're too small for a comic. But yeah, the Klan. He fought the Klan.
Kyber Cruel.
Don't know him. That sounds like hard to say, but you know.
Dr. Doom. So, getting back to this. So all I'm saying, ready?
Yeah, man.
So look, all I'm saying is that there are a lot of villains that could possibly use. And one thing that the Marvel MCU has been doing, they've been using villains from different stories in other cases. And I think this is a great opportunity to use something else. I mean, you have, you know, Wakanda, you have magical properties. Use Mephisto or use Nightshade, or, you know, you can also use, like I said, I'm a big proponent of Dr. Doom, but I know he may be a little too thin with a lot of stuff. There's also a story involved with Dr. Doom. I don't know. I'm just saying that I just think that it's just too close to be doing a Namor movie, having Namor being a major bad. You know, what is he going to do? He's going to fight against the humans on land because the same way that Aquaman did in the sea. Hey, protecting the sea. The story is too similar, too close. I think it's just a bad comparison to do that, period. You know?
Well, in my mind, for Black Panther 2, since they already used up all the big villains, they have to not do, since Black Panther is a billion-dollar movie. So they need to go either, I mean, because who's it? Don McGregor has a bunch of stories, but they're not with supervillains all the time. And there's other people to pull out of Don McGregor's run. You could possibly pull someone out of some of the later runs. But one of the things that you have to remember that with this property, if you're going to go through the Marvel Universe, you can't just immediately go for the Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four villains. You have to find a villain. Like Nightshade on the angle is at least someone that's obscure enough to say, all right, it's a Captain American villain, but it's not that big. It won't be missed. That's why...
He could be a villain that could influence other people. Like they have the whole run with Ta-Nehisi Coates, where you have the Dora Milaje fighting against the Black Panther, where you could say Nightshade was the one that was influencing them, you know, and that changes there. So you can use something along those lines, or let's say he changes some of the bad guy. What's the guy who? What's the brother who's in the mountains? What's his name again? We don't call him Ape Man now. We call him
well, Man-Ape.
Yeah, Man-Ape. Yeah. So that could be used, you know. I'm just saying. My fear, again, I'm just saying, I'm going to say it again. My fear is just that when someone sees Namor and they say, oh, this is a water lord, they're going to say, hey, Aquaman, where's Jason Momoa? And we see the presence. Jason Momoa's movie made $1 billion, you know, and that's one of the more successful DC movies. And that's on the strength of the character, is on the strength of the director, that they were able to create a credible world, which if you look at it, remember when we were watching the movie, we were like, there's some similarities to Wakanda there, isn't it? You know, and now you're going to have to do something similar to Atlantis. You're going to have to show the world of Wakanda, of Atlantis. And that's where you're going to find, I think, people are going to say, what are we watching? DC, Marvel stealing DC's thunder? If that's the goal, then that's the goal, but it's not the goal. It's not helping to make Black Panther a better movie. That's my thoughts.
That's one of the things that Marvel feels when they looked at it and they were like, well, like because Aquaman didn't just give you that. They gave you, and I think that was more Jeff Johns. Here's all these realms and areas underwater that Aquaman can play in. So Marvel looked at it and said, underwater, that's Wakanda. But there's other things that he went to show how vast the ocean is, which is important. And Aquaman, that's the thing, they can go to the deep with all those crazy monsters, those Loch Ness monsters type of characters, and play in that area. There's a lot of area to play. And if Marvel just looks at, or Disney just looks at it and say they kind of stole our thunder, making him a king, but he was a reluctant king, that sort of thing. There was a brother. There's all this other stuff. There's the aspect of, the brother, even though beating the brother, there's sort of hey, there's some sort of brotherhood here. So there's differences, there's similarities. But I mean, when you have a property that's that successful, you have a shared universe, and you've already used the top 3 villains. You have to sit back and you have to say, let me dig. And that's what many creators would do. Like the aspect of Frank Miller taking the Kingpin and taking Bullseye, those characters had outlived their usefulness. Now, John Romita did some classic stuff with the Kingpin, but at some point Marvel decided he wasn't as strong as Spider-Man, even though he was shown to be as strong as Spider-Man. But that put him right in line to fight Daredevil. And that's why I always struggle with Spider-Man being so strong, because he has so many cool villains. Sometimes someone decides, oh, those villains don't have any power. Spider-Man, obviously, is almost as strong as this person. And it kills that. But there's so many villains that people thought were lame that you could go find, even like, if you look at, because that was from Bendis, and he did, what's that thing? Alias and Jessica Jones. Now, everyone thought the Purple Man was a lame villain. I didn't actually think he was a lame villain.
I thought he was good.
But he had a great power, which they didn't utilize, but they say, oh, he's purple. That's kind of, how does this work? But he controls mind. He can control the Kingpin. He can control anybody. So with that sort of power, and you keep him at a low level, he would be a great person more for Daredevil, because he can't change Daredevil, but Daredevil would have to fight people that are like, that are normal people. And that makes it real compelling sort of story where Daredevil could win, but how many people will the Purple Man put in front of him that he'd have to beat up to stop him? So that's where that's one of the things that and that's what the strength of Marvel Comics has been in the past, especially in the 80s, taking people at some point people felt were old hat. Even at some point, Galactus kind of got to the point where people felt he wasn't that big, or a lot of them fall apart, and then at some point you had to build them back up, and that's what the 80s creators sort of did. So if you look at that, now you don't have a lot of stories to go to there is stories, but at the same time you're not going to go to Jack Kirby's thing and you're going to pull out actual monster from the Wakandan caves and say, here, what's the name's brother, like one of T'Challa's cousins, went in and just connected with pure vibranium and becomes this big monster. Like, you could do that, but and then you get to see more of his family, that sort of thing. But I'm not sure if they would want to do it. They probably have to look through it and kind of make it as believable as possible, because I don't know if people look through. And then there's here.
You like the idea of Namor being in the movie. That's really what it comes down to.
If they would do that, I would rather it be Atuma and Namor being in the middle. So I'm just thinking about it now. Like, take one of the other Atlanteans, like Krang or something like that, and Namor being in a place where the surface world has done all this stuff, and the Black Panther and the Submariner are kind of in between, because they are their actual state that could deal with this. And then if you want to have a walk-on Doctor Doom, you could have him walk in and say, I'm not going to get involved in this. Because that's the key. The great part about Marvel is that it existed in our realm, our Earth, but at the same time, it was in our backyard. So it was like, oh, it's somewhere in New York. I don't know where the Baxter Building is. So if you have these, you want to do that Storm, Undrained, that sort of thing that who's that guy did? Christopher Priest did. you'd probably try to do the villains called Krang or Atuma, and have them be the ones warring with Wakanda, and then you can get Namor in there, who's sort of a man of the surface world and of Atlantis, and then you can get the anti-hero part where he comes in. He could he can have a draw on the women, that sort of aspect, like a James Bond thing, because that's one of the things that, and Namor has a weakness for, his heart is also his biggest weakness. So that's where you would do him, but having him the lead villain wouldn't work for me, because then you have to have Black Panther beat the Submariner instead of doing what they did at the end of the Black Panther movie, where, what are you shaking your head about?
I just disagree with you.
What would you ask me and then you shake your head?
But dude, I get what you're saying. I'm not necessarily in agreement with that at all, but
you didn't need to say that.
So, anything else you want to add? Oh, Kraven.
Well, I think Kraven. I think Sony already has plans for Kraven.
Yeah, so I don't even think it's realistic.
Why would you do a Kraven story when they already plan to do a Kraven movie?
No, I don't think that is realistic. I think I think it would be a better story with Spider-Man and Kraven. I think that'd be a great idea there, but I don't know if I feel.
It'd be no different than it'd be no different than the last movie they made, because Kraven would have to be a public sort of person who's publicly beating Spider-Man, that sort of thing. It goes in the same stuff as Mysterio. So yeah. What is he? He doesn't present himself as a villain when he's first met. He presents himself as someone who decides, I'm going to challenge Spider-Man. And Spider-Man
captures for being
say that. He just comes in. He's just going to better Spider-Man, and he keeps doing it because he keeps cheating. So then at some point they're in like Central Park, and he ties Spider-Man's hand to his leg, and Spider-Man has to fight him like that. So it's like so it's more of him being, and then when you translate that to present day, then that turns into internet public, and then that gives you everything that happened at the end of Mysterio in the Far From Home. So in my mind, he is a Spider-Man villain. It would be good for a story, but they turned Black Panther in this big world thing, like a real sort of political aspects to his character. Like, yes. Since they introduced him and killing his father, and even though, the memes have pointed out that it takes all of the stuff from The Lion King, the connection with the father, the loss of, it's there. What am I supposed to say? But you've introduced this guy, so that's what they'd have to use. They could pull some Kirby villains, but the problem is that you can't. Then people would have to stop being cynical about the Kirby villains. They'd have to look at them and say, this is a real villain.
Yeah, the only thing is that you're tying down. You're saying because it hasn't appeared in the comics, you can't use a villain already. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
What do you mean?
I'm saying there's so many villains they can possibly use. If they can match him up properly, they can utilize a villain that he hasn't currently had before in the past.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, good.
I was saying that it feels like it has to be bigger. It has to be like someone that has their own realm, and I'm going to connect the page.
Yes.
So we have this character here, Kibber the Cruel, who has his own realm, has his own wacky sort of people there. But that would be could be someplace that's close to Wakanda, and they, because I think they sort of like almost pass through walls, like the way the Vision does to meet the Black Panther. So you have the Black Panther comic has a bunch of things that you could sort of go to, but you just have to be not basically understand that you're the writer and there's no bad characters, only bad writers. That's a Neil Adams comment. So you have to look at it and decide, you know what? I'm going to do I'm going to use that character as a villain, and I'm going to pull out something that's strong with that character. So
Interesting. Okay. So thank you very much, Petey.
Yes.
Spin a rack.
Out.